and get started and intro all of you. Welcome everybody to the session today. There's a number of people on, and more will join, I guess, as we go forward here. But I'll start with the introductions. Just a little kind of introduction is this the event today and the last two that we've had, plus the one next week, are all in conjunction with ARMA RIM month, actually Records and Information Management month, which is the month of April. And very, very pleased to have the job of introducing speakers for our events. My name is Rick Sterling. I'm with Western IM, as you can see from my background, I guess. And I just quickly introduce my partner, Troy, who's also on with us today. Troy's here to keep me up to speed, make sure everything's running for us successfully for the webinar today. It's now my pleasure to introduce the panel, the MC and the panel. Before I do that, though, there is chat and QA on this session, so please feel free to put your questions into the chat and QA. We'll be monitoring that all the time. I see a lot of people on our session, but the number count is going up as we speak. So let me do my introduction today. First, our MC for the day, Sandra Kleimenhaga. Sandra has worked in the education sector for 20 years. She has two primary focuses in her portfolio: data administration and software applications development management. She's directly responsible for student data management, analytics, analysis, and reporting tools. In-house develop software applications, quality controls, and departmental standards to ensure quality standards. So Sandra and I didn't really know what each other did, so I just found this out. Sandra, I'm sorry to say, I just found this out. So very, very interesting. Thank you. All good. And our panelists today, Angela Watt, and I'm going to say that I've known Angela for quite a number of years. I won't say how many that's been because we never do that anymore. Do we, Angela?
No, we don't. We don't.
Angela is the CEO of Thanks a Watt Business Solutions. Angela is a certified information professional with 17 years of cross-industry experience working in managing information assets for municipal government and private industry. She's skilled at change management, identifying knowledge gaps across a corporation, extensive experience designing, implementing, and training staff at all levels on information governance. One of my very favorite topics, information governance, Angela. Thanks for being here today. Mohammed Thompson. Mohammed is currently the manager of GIS services at the Saskatchewan Ministry of Highways. Mohammed has over 25 years of experience in geospatial industry and data management, 10 years with Ministry of Highways. Mohammed is well-recognized GIS professional in the geospatial community with the interest in geospatial technology, data standards, data governance, public policy, and strategy decision-making. He's contributed to GIS literature, co-authored publications. He's also a two-time recipient of the Ministry's Award for Excellence and is currently playing a key role in the development of data strategy / data governance for the Ministry of Highways. So thank you, Mohammed, for being here today and sharing this session with us.
Thank you, Rick.
Alan Thompson. Alan is an evolving information professional who consults to the public and private sectors. He has over 15 years experience in RIM, Records and Information Management, and gets fired up about governance, information, privacy, and data, helping people reimagine their relationships with information, data in general, and bicycles. So I'm going to ask you about that later, Alan, sometime about bicycles. Thanks so much. And thank ARMA, Western Canada ARMA chapters for putting all of this together. These sessions, make sure you book in for next week's session, which is our last of 4 for RIM month. Exceptional presentations so far, just awesome. So I'm going to tune out at the moment and let everybody have at it. Sandra, if you would take over, thank you.
All right. Okay. Well,
Angela, Alan, and Mohammed, thank you so much for agreeing to be on the panel. So I guess, for questions, like we do have the chat here, and it might make most sense to save the questions till the end. There are a number of topics that we wanted to get through. So if that works for everybody, I'll keep my eye on the chat and address those at the end. But maybe what I'll do is just kind of dive right into it. And Angela, let's start with you. So, first of all, was there anything that you wanted to add about, what you do that Rick didn't touch on when, that might be really key to the data governance and data strategy that we're going to talk about today? And then the other thing is, how do you define data governance and data strategy, and what do you see as the difference between the two?
Just to add with what Rick was saying is one thing that all IM professionals are is we aren't just one thing. So data, information, knowledge, all of it. So really what it comes down to is governing things. And to me, data governance is a formalization to give guidance to behavior. It's administration and discipline. So it gives that overarching governing view on what we're supposed to do. And discipline specifically, it can be done without a stick on how it's developed. We don't need that stick anymore. And but it gives that overarching push and direction to everything else. So that's what it is to me. And the difference with data strategy is from my perception, the strategy is how are we going to do it now? How are we going to take that governance and those ideologies and that formalized behavior and apply it to what we're actually doing in a structured, sort of loosely linear-ish pattern.
All right. Alan, what about you? Anything to add to, first of all, from what Rick had mentioned about what you do? And also to, same question to you, how do you define data governance and data strategy, and what do you see as the difference?
Sure. Rick actually made me sound pretty cool, so I'm not gonna screw around with that. Data strategy for me, like it's corporate strategy, any strategy, it's high level, it's the goals you want to achieve. Governance can be a strategy, part of a strategy. Set of tools, like my background is very heavily in the compliance space. So while I agree the stick is a bit outdated, unfortunately, lots of the work I have done has been mighty close to the stick. But governance-wise, it's how are we going to be consistent, and what are the outcomes we want to meet our needs, the rest of the strategy.
Great. And Mohammed, same question to you. Did Rick miss touching on anything that you do in your current role that's really relevant for this discussion? And, how do you define data governance and data strategy, and what do you see as the difference between the two?
Thank you, Sandra. I echo Alan that Rick did a pretty good job in introducing us. Thank you, Rick. But I'll dive directly into the data strategy and data governance definition. Maybe you find some of my comments a little bit biased because I'm coming from the geospatial industry, spatial data, and our routine attribute a spatial data set, work in the transportation industry. That's where we all the time handle lots of data set. So as in the introduction, Rick mentioned that I am right now, I'm working on the data strategy for the ministry. That's how we're looking the data strategy and the governance. Actually, what we're seeing here is data strategy on the top, and the governance is the next step. For example, we're dividing data strategy, or you can say 3 components of the data strategy: data governance, data management, and data standardization. So basically, in this scenario, we define the data strategy as a blueprint intent to improve all of the ways ministries or any organization collect, receive, store, manage, share, analyze, and use the data set. Basically, the way we are defining was thinking like the data strategy is basically establishes the common method, standards are the practices. And on the data governance side, it's kind of a formal organization, as Angela said, formal organization of people, process, technology, and service delivery. And the data governance is basically the practice or the action, or we can say at its most basic level, data governance is about bringing data under control and keeping it square in the square environment.
Yeah, I like the way you frame that, Mohammed, the way, you kind of with your hands, you're like strategy, governance, and I think you all touched on that. So, Angela, the next question we have here is, what are some of the key challenges in the data world, and why do we need data governance?
Well, that's a big question, and I think there's a few challenges. One being that the idea that governance is the same as lifecycle management, and I'm sure that everybody's seen recently in the media with the change in Microsoft, that they're calling it lifecycle management, but governance is not lifecycle management. It's data management, not the strategy. The other challenge is legacy data. There's lots of times that organizations will bring in a software tool and say, oh, we'll just go point forward, and then that data and all that information is just left in the dark abyss that nobody ever wants to go into ever again. Different understanding of what data is. I saw there was a question in the chat about what is data. So that can entirely depend on the stakeholder. Governance and what data is and what data governance is could mean different things to different roles, different areas, different stakeholders. And finally, data literacy, how to make critical decisions on good data wherever possible and removing the bias wherever possible. And sometimes removing the bias out of data is sometimes tricky. We like to think that data is factual and black and white, but it's not. And having that kind of understanding of what that looks like. So I think there's a lot of challenges. And why do we need it? Because like Mohammed said, we try to control things. We do our best, friends. We do our best. We got to make it accessible to people and be able to make decisions on it.
Yeah. Alan, same question to you. What are some of the key challenges in the data world, and why do we need data governance?
Sure. So for me, purpose is a big one, because I read a lot about organizations or professionals like us telling people they need to be data-driven organizations, make data-driven decisions. Okay, fine, that's great. How are you going to do it? There needs to be a strategy, and you need to know what you want to do, because as we're all aware, lots of us in the room are information professionals. A room full of unidentifiable files isn't a lot of good to anyone, to the point of actually being a liability to the organization. And so that also goes into dark data, which is the data you don't know you have. I saw a report the other day that says something like 60% of every organization's data is dark. I've been lucky. Lots of the orgs I've been involved with have a pretty good perception, but coming from the IM world, that doesn't necessarily surprise me. And it comes down to, what do we want to do with the data? And that's what drives the governance, right? Because if it's, we want to create financial profiles of our customers, you're really limited in the way you can do that with data and privacy legislation. You want to do something like, we want to look at all of our customers' emails and establish tone. How long are we going to keep that information? Are we going to benchmark it over a period of years? So we need governance to make strategy easier, I would say. And we need governance because it helps us establish trust with the consumer. And I mean, I read the newspaper every morning, and I think the past week, there's been like 3 headlines in the New York Times that all say data, and they're about something different. So if we're the end of the stick that doesn't exist anymore, we need to be turned on and intentional about how we're going to keep our organizations transparent.
Yeah, something that you said, Alan, to, you know, what kind of decisions are we going to make with that data? Because I don't know, I'm sure we've all experienced where you get a request for data and you pull it and you spend hours presenting it in a way that folks need, and then they don't even look at it. Or, oh, right, I asked for that. Oh, I'm good, you know. What about you, Mohammed? Same question to you. What are some of the key challenges in the data world, and why do we need data governance?
That's a very good question, Sandra. When we started talking about the data governance within the ministry or within our organization, that's the questions people asked me, what the heck are you trying to do here? So my answer was, okay, what I'm trying to do here, at what my team is trying to do, and trying to ensure our organization's internal heterogeneous data in a synchronized way to meet the future demands and support growth. What that means is our organization, like Ministry of Highway, manages and maintains broad spectrum of information about provincial roadways. All other organizations receive lots of data from different sources and manage some internal data set as well. And in our organization, this information is distributed throughout the ministry in through the different systems. Ministry's existing data set sits in multiple data models, multiple data formats. So that's why in the beginning, I talk about the control. We have to have some kind of a control on it. So we have to develop some kind of a standards. So that's why we need the data governance. So, and another thing is data governance basically is as we say, is data is the key asset for the ministry. That's what one thing we took it to our executive and say, okay, well, our executive should declare that data is an asset. It's not a byproduct like all other assets. That's what we kind of succeeded in, that our executive declared that, okay, data is an asset. And now what data governance can do, data governance can enable business values. It is nearly impossible to achieve data-driven decision-making without collaborative efforts of governance around organization's key data set. If we're saying it asset, we need resources to maintain those assets, right? And we need some kind of governance to maintain those assets. And other, you can say why, another point is data is a key component of digital transformation. Everybody talk about the digital transformation. If we don't have the governance around our data set, how we're going to do the digital transformation? That's kind of the key, another key point. Another one is management oversight. Right now, as I said, lots of data is kicking around within the organizations. We don't know where the data sets are. So it's management oversight is very important. Data governance will ensure the oversight of the corporate data assets. Another one is the integration and the automation. So we have to develop the integrated system, especially in the geospatial world. In GIS, we rely on the integrated system. Even if the data is coming from the different sources, although if it's in the database, not in the Excel file or in the PDF file, that's a different story. But if it's in the databases, we can link different databases and to develop some kind of application. So it is very important for the integration as well. So we are moving towards the open government, open data set. How are we going to do it without the data governance? So that's why data governance is very important. And for actually having a single authoritative data of an organization is another key to have the data governance. Because if multiple people are releasing the data set without governance, then it's kind of create problem when we release the data in the public environment. So it's good to have the governance. So when we release the information to the public or other stakeholders, so we can say that this is the authoritative version of the data set. That's why data governance is very important.
Yeah, and you know, you bringing up even integration and stuff, and I'm sure again we can all attest to the more that people are becoming more knowledgeable about what can be done. It's almost like your asks about integrations are increasing all the time, and you know, data is powerful, and people are starting to figure it out outside of the data professionals that, you know, would be here at this session. Mohammed, I'm going to start with you this time. Next question. As information professionals, we all engage in digitization projects and understand that simply scanning is not sufficient. Tell us a little bit about the situations where data is important in digitization projects.
Thank you, Sandra. Digitization, even in the geospatial world, that's where we started the digitizations. Road network, we want these roads, those are on the land, we want it on the computer screen. That's what we digitize. What to do next now? We need to have the information attached to it. How are we going to manage it? How we put the governance around it? So as you said, the scanning is not sufficient. Actually, scanning creates the mess if you don't have the governance around it, if you don't have the metadata. Basically, this is coming from my own experience and my colleagues' experience in the record management. We can scan the document. Okay, here's the file. Okay, it's in the file. There's a folder, there's a file, and how to get it? You know, the person is retired, where to get that information? You have to have some kind of governance around it. That's very important. Scanning is not good enough. Yes, that's the first step, but you have, I would say that's the second step. You have to come up with the governance first, then you start doing the scanning or digitization project.
Great point. Alan, same question to you. As information professionals, we all engage in digitization projects and understand that simply scanning is not sufficient. Tell us a little bit about the situations where data is important in digitization projects.
Sure. So like building off of what Mohammed said, listening to him, I just want to throw my arms up in the air and keep cheering, because I agree. And we've all been in that room where we hear, you know, let's scan 400 boxes because scanning is good. And sometimes it actually really sucks to be the guy who says, hold on a minute, what's the goal here? And like when I was sort of blueprinting the answers to these questions, I kept repeating two things. One was the dark data, which Mohammed has touched on. The other one is scope and purpose and strategy. What are you going to do with it? Why do you want to do something with it? And if you don't have that figured out before you started, you're already behind the ball. I'm not saying it can't be fixed, but it's a lot harder to fix. And for me, that also ties in to culture, because when we talk about these issues, governance and strategy, it's not just a technical question, it's a culture question and a management question. And if your leaders aren't endorsing open-mindedness, accessibility, or highlighting that this is important, you're not going to get as far. So for me, that's a big challenge. The other one is data portability, and that goes back into that strategic element is, what are we going to do with this data in 5 years? Are we keeping it 5 years from now? Do we want to keep it 5 years from now? And do we have the governance in place to make that happen? Which even goes back to, are we telling our clients at the point of collection, that's what we intend to do with this data? So it's layered, but purpose, it's all about purpose.
It's overwhelming, isn't it? The amount of data when you think about all the documents that come, and yeah, it's overwhelming. Angela, I'm going to ask you the same question. As information professionals, we all engage in digitization projects and understand that simply scanning is not sufficient. Tell us a little bit. Tell us a little about the situations where data is important in digitization projects.
There's a lot of, just to add on to Alan and Mohammed, There's usually, when somebody wants to digitize something, that's usually for access reasons in my experience. But just to speak to, there's two different ways of, two different kinds of documents that Alan and Mohammed were speaking to. So roads, if you take a road and you just, a road map or a plan and you scan it, there's lots of different data on it. Well, who's going to be using that and why? Emergency services. So do you want to make sure that the data they're extracting off that scan is accurate? Because it's kind of awkward if they can't have, if they don't have the right data for it. Also, it's a permanent record. It can be a permanent record. So what's the archival quality of that scan? If somebody's just going to throw something on the scanner, how long does it need to be kept for? In what format? What quality assurance are you doing on that? Defensibility of the scans. If you have a form that somebody signed and authorized something, can you prove without a reasonable doubt that that was the person who signed it? Can you authenticate the signatures? Can you authenticate to the data? Can you pull the data off the form and then use it for demographical analytics? So again, like Alan was talking about, what decisions and what do you want to actually do? Why are you digitizing? Have those questions about it. If you're scanning older records, is it something that you're going to want to push out to the public? Is it going to be a format that's accessible? Is it going to be a large file that they have to download? How are you increasing that by doing digitization? So really have those questions about why are you doing it, and have the parameters to make sure that the scans are being done well, according to standard, and being maintained in a way that allows for that access, even for business continuity and disaster recovery.
Nice. Yeah, the whole signature thing, you know, that resonates with me, because it's like, if you scan a document and then it's something that you're supposed to keep for 15 years, you know, and you have to go validate that signature, there's legalities around that, right? So there's just so much to consider on every little thing, that every little project that you do, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
Next question, Alan, I'm going to start with you. So tell us about your experience with data initiatives, and how do we best structure our data initiatives?
Okay, so I mean, you can probably tell by now that I've been doing some studying on my project management body of knowledge, but again, scope and purpose, know what you want to accomplish and what you want to do. Structure-wise, it's bringing everybody to the table who might be involved. Like, if you're the privacy officer and the information management guy, you probably have a data group in the organization. And even if you're not sure there's data in there, if this is something you want to build and something you're turned on to, go to the data guys and say, hey, is there an opportunity here? How does this integrate into our data architecture and our data strategy? Personal experience, I was involved with a large organization who was renovating its SAP implementation, and it hadn't put any data governance in place when it was initially released. And this was about 5 years in to the product life cycle. And we were going through and cataloging every data point in SAP to assign retention, which is a point I wanted to touch on. Angela discussed, and you mentioned too, Sandra, you know, we're keeping a document for 15 years, but if we're capturing data off that document, the data's living in another place, and that has a retention obligation too. So there was good high-level governance, but those really granular things had to go back, and it ended up being a case of leveraging some pretty high-cost labor to do something that would have been a lot easier at the get-go. The other way data can segue interim into digitization projects is looking what data do we have as IM professionals that would benefit from being leveraged in a different way. For me, a different project I worked on, there was a gap in the ECN system around assigning permissions and retentions. So what we were able to do, because the data was kind of portable, is we exported it, and I actually created a database to model how permissions were being assigned and how retention was being assigned. And we were actually able to reduce like the user base by something like 30%, just because there were expired users, that kind of thing. And we were able to streamline a lot of things. So basically we took a Word document, put it into a spreadsheet, put it into Data Studio, and went from there. So yeah, the other thing with structure, I guess I would say, is that we emphasize the accessibility and the innovation aspect. It's a progressive thing and it's a cultural thing, and integrated into our business purpose.
Thank you for that, Alan. Angela, I'm going to ask you the same question. Tell us about your experience with data initiatives and how do we best structure our data initiatives?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. Actually, I wanted to there's working in the municipal area, I've seen a lot of data initiatives come up with. Usually what happens is somebody wants to either upgrade or migrate to a new software solution. And they have, from an IM perspective, there's multiple information sources. So that brings to the comment that I saw in the chat that the brilliant Wayne Hoff mentioned about, if it's born digital, then why are you digitizing it? Which is valid. So it matters on where the data is coming from. But it also speaks to, there's lots of data sources. So some are born digital, some are in paper, some are duplicated across different organizations in different formats. So the data initiatives that I've seen is when they're when they're implementing new software tools, they only focus on one area. So the best way to structure the initiative is do the governance, like we've been saying at the beginning. Understand the analysis and the business process. So do your business process mapping, not only on one siloed area, but on the whole organization. I hear a lot of the times that people like to say, get the low hanging fruit. And I'm like, why? Look at the whole tree. There's a forest. So don't just go for the low hanging fruit, grab the juicy ones that are on the top and don't forget about them, because sometimes they might have other data that connects to the ones you're bringing in. Have a clear understanding of what you want to achieve and why, and don't just look at the tool. Look at the requirements that you're trying to achieve, the functional requirements, the non-functional requirements. Look at how the data connects to the people that are using it. Do a file plan, a privacy impact and governance assessment. What's the impact to the organization that you're doing? Do all of that beforehand. And some people think it's boring. I like that part, but some people don't want to do it because sometimes it's difficult. But it's arguably the most important, because if you don't know where you want to go, you can't design a plan to get there. So that's from any initiative, data, information, knowledge, any of that, have a plan and have a strategy and understand why we're doing it and be able to communicate that to everyone. Because they might not understand our data speak. They might not. So we got to break it down for them.
And I think too, like you talk about that tree and when you're dealing with digitization, that tree is so big. Yeah. There's so many different things that you have to consider, and it's overwhelming. It's not like a piece of paper in a filing cabinet where it's dated and you can just shred it. You know what I mean? It's as great as technology is, it also complicates things 1,000-fold, doesn't it?
Hashtag it's complicated. It's not just as simple as scanning a property file. What's also attached to that property that might be included in that.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Angela. Mohammed, I'm going to ask you the same question. Tell us about your experience with data initiatives and how do we best structure our data initiatives? You're just on mute, Mohammed.
Combine Ellen's and Angela's comment. First of all, I think have to have a scope what you're trying to do. As Angela mentioned, do not work in silos. You have to have organization-wide data strategies. We have experience where big organizations, different branches start their small initiative in their area, come up with their data plan and all those things. But it's still in the silos. If you start working on a bigger initiative organization-wide, then you face all these kind of problems. Because the first thing is, every branch doesn't have the data experts or the record management experts. So they are doing from their gut feel, right? However they think they want to do it, they just do it. So must have an organization-wide initiative. And so important thing is, Alan touched on it, you just go meet with the people, collaboration. So 3 important things we outlined here when you start an initiative or start working on the data governance. One is the collaboration. Collaboration is the key to solve the data related challenges, because you are not the one who's producing the data. There's a multiple people in the organization, multiple branches, the data coming from maybe multiple sources. So you have to collaborate with them. You have to collaborate with your internal staff, with your stakeholders, just talk to them and just highlight why you want to do it and how this is going to benefit them. So our why was, why we want to do it, we want to deliver the best services to the citizens. So that is very important for us. Everybody recognize that. That's what we're working towards. So the data is very important. So the collaboration is important. That's how we try to bring everyone on board. The second thing is continuous improvement. Keep in mind, once you start working on a data initiative, it's not just one time deal. No. You have to identify it, you have to plan it, you have to execute, and then you have to review it. It's a continuous process, and many organizations has the continuous improvement as a culture, but I always say culture is not good enough. You have to make it a norm in your daily life. You continuously improving what you are doing, especially on the data side. Another one is the innovations. Alan touched on it. Innovation with the tight budgets, limited resources, innovation is the way forward to maintain our information systems. You have to bring the tools, you have to bring different technologies, and also the experts as well who can provide you some innovative ideas to manage your data set.
Yeah, and when you speak of those silos, I think that for smaller organizations, and I mean even ours, I work in a school division, those silos they can create real challenges. You have a privacy officer that sits over here, and the people that are working on the projects might not be really knowledgeable about privacy because it's what your budget allows for, and that is tough. That is really tough.
Sandra, sometimes silos are costly as well because you are redoing the work. And people want to stay in their silos? They are scared when they share the information. So you have to convince them information is the power when you share it. If you keep it to yourself, there's no use of that information because it's not benefiting the taxpayers, it's not benefiting the citizens. These are some of the questions we always receive. This is my data. I know how to use it. It's working for me. Yeah. No, yes, it's working for you, but we want to make it work for everyone. So that's some of the issues you will face when you start these kind of data initiatives.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, our last question, and then I think we might have some questions in the chat there. So Angela, I'm going to start with you. And so many technologies exist to aid us with our data governance. Technology shouldn't be introduced without the appropriate governance in place. How do we approach the introduction of technology?
Technology is a tool, and I think a lot of us understand this already. Tech can help us, but tech can also hinder us if it's not done without the proper governance in place. But one of the keys to governance, and it's something that it's really important to me, is weaving the people into it, weaving the people in the process into it. You need a change management piece, but it's not, when you're doing an initiative, don't do change management as its own line item. Change management needs to be weaved into the entire process. And from working in an IT department, I learned that change management in some respects is a form that you fill out. So having that understanding, it's not a change management ITIL form. It's change management of how it's going to affect the people and the culture. Understanding how it impacts the overall corporate culture as well. Does that data governance and technology, does it support the actual vision and mission of the organization? Does it support all areas equally, or does it just support one? Keep in mind that, like I said before, governance is formalizing the behavior. Don't bring tech in without considering the people and processes that are using it, because tech and any initiative, when it relates to their information, impacts the culture. If it's going to hinder their ability to work, or if they have to take a lot of steps to learn a software, something simple as records management. I don't believe that we should have to train all staff to be records managers. That's not their job. So we shouldn't have that same expectation on tech. It should be easy for them to use, and easy to train and easy to update. And keep in mind that technology is super, super short span. Unlike the microfiche of that kind of information, it's going to change over time. So you're going to have to keep training people. If you have the right governance, it can be resilient to all of those changes and have that standard, that formalized behavior of how to go forward with it. So how do we approach the introduction of technology, keeping in mind that it's not replacing people, it's supposed to help them?
That is such a great point. And I think often that's a scary one for people, which makes that change management so hard, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Alan, I'm going to go to you. Same question. So many technologies exist to aid us with our data governance. Technology shouldn't be introduced without the appropriate governance in place. How do we approach the introduction of technology?
I'm going to be a little bit contrarian with this one. So my attitude tends to be govern the behavior in the product, not the technology, because if we associate a lot of rules with one piece of software, we're less likely to get the buy-in, and we're more likely to get the hostility. And I saw this deployed really well at ATB. Great privacy governance program, great information governance program, and I'm not just saying that because I helped work on it, but it's the good foundation, and then being able to have access to all of those applications that can help you do the work, as long as you're not emailing the data sets out or something, you're probably okay. And that's a really great way to foster that innovation and that freedom. And the other thing is integrating the new technology as professional development. Rather than a need to have, make it an opportunity for people. And this goes outside of your tech department, and it goes from everybody to like your customer service agents to your senior executives. Do you want to learn something about data dashboarding? Great. Here's a Coursera course on how to use Tableau. Here's a course on how to contribute to Calibra, which is a data governance technology. I was joking earlier with Angela how ironic it is that basically since I've been involved in RIM, everybody's been desperate for a great dictionary thesaurus metadata management technology, and it was the IT industry who solved the problem and didn't tell us. So yeah, for me, it's about accessibility, and it's winning hearts and minds before selling a particular tool, because if you're inside their head, it's easy to point them towards something. I guess
Yeah, I like that, winning the hearts and minds, because really then it just makes for a far more successful project, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do. I'm well aware that it's not,
Yeah.
but it's a good goal, I think, and it's an achievable goal. But like anything, it takes work.
Yeah. And I think too, like I work in an IT department, and I think sometimes we are guilty of just forgetting about the person behind it because we get it. It's easy for us. This is really great. You all should see it the same way, right?
Mhm.
That's not the way it goes. Mohammed, I'm going to ask you the same question. So many technologies exist to aid us with our data governance. Technology shouldn't be introduced without the appropriate governance in place. How do we approach the introduction of technology?
Thank you, Sandra. It's first, I think, as I mentioned before, outline your scope, what you want to achieve with your data governance and what you want to achieve from this technology. And, a couple comments already being made, like associating your data governance or the data set or the record management with one vendor software or one software is not a good idea. If there are a lot of vendors just promote their proprietary kind of format, keep your data open. So because data or the information is your organization asset, the application is not. It's coming from the third-party vendor. So data is the asset. So you have to protect the data. Tomorrow, maybe you end up using some other technology, but you will be able to use your existing data set. That's very important here. And when you are deciding to implement some kind of technology, please consult with your experts. I'm not talking about the IT expert because I do not see data management or the information management as a function of IT. I see it as a function of business. It's the business people who should be driving this information, this technology implementation. So the business people, they are trained for like data expert, they are trained for the management of the data set. IT is just supporting. Same in the financial world. There are accountant, but nobody writing the things on their books right now, anymore. They use the computer software. Computer is helping them, technology helping them. Same thing. Consult with your expert. As I said before, don't work in silos because a bigger organization, they have the problem. They have the money, actually, some of the branches, they go out and buy their own software and start implementing the technology. No, that's not a good idea. The corporate level, try to use the enterprise level softwares, try to use the enterprise level technology when you have to implement this data governance or data management strategy. I know Google is very good for us. It's we use it every day, but it's also create trouble for us as well, because anybody can go, okay, data management software, record management software, hundreds of, oh, this is cool, get it. That's why I said must consult your data experts. Thank you.
Or Mohammed, it's like, well, so-and-so down the street at that organization uses that one and they love it. No, they made a bad choice too. Like, we're not picking it. They made a bad choice. No. Oh, thank you so much for your perspectives. I'm just going to hit the chat here because I know that we did have one question in here. I'm sorry, I'm slow on this. I was not keeping up with it.
There's lots of great comments and questions in there.
Lots of great comments. I know for sure there was one. Angela, maybe you're going to pick it out quicker than me. Do you see it?
I think there was one about data classification.
Yes. I did see that one.
Yeah, how can we get in front of proactive classification?
Yeah, any thoughts on how does one get out in front of and be proactive in data classification?
Actually, when I mentioned that Sandra, first, do you want me to take this question?
Oh, please.
Okay.
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm sure people can chime in with their own comments too.
Yeah. So it's for us, as I explained before, there's a data strategy, then there's 3 components: data governance, management, and data standardization. Under data standardization, we've gone through all the data set, naming convention, all those things. That's where we make the data classification as well. Then we, as I said, collaboration is very important. We reach out to each and every branch and say, okay, this is your data set. And do you classify it as a restricted? We have the classes A, B, C, D. It's kind of restricted, non-restricted, restricted to the organization, RHC class, which is public. So we came up with the classification under data standardization process.
Anything to add on to that, Angela?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Again, hearts and minds can be beneficial here, like from an information management perspective, especially in a small organization. Say you're rewriting the information management policy, go talk to the GIS guy and talk to your IT shop and say, I'm rewriting the IM policy and I'd like to include data in our scope, and start sliding the data word into the policy beside information and data sources, because then you've already set up your structure to solve these problems. And like, yeah, I think that's what I'd add.
And just to add on to that is depending on who you're talking to, you might need to finesse your wording. So when I hear classification, that could mean security classification and that affects accessibility. It could also mean information classification. Yeah, content classification. Yeah, security class is one small, but there's different kinds of classification. So one way that I get in front of that to different areas is I relate it to something that most people understand, which is libraries. You walk into a library and everything is classified. There's a Dewey Decimal classification, right? So kind of relating it back to that. Why do you want to do it? So everybody can find it. And how do you want to classify it? It depends on what it's going into.
Yeah.
But having a standard taxonomy and a standard way to name things and to classify it both from different areas of security, content, and information, having that good conversation there. But ultimately, it's so you can, it becomes a tool that can be applied to any software tool. Because like I said before, technology is a tool. So if you have that taxonomy, if you have that classification system set up from all aspects, then it's agnostic to software, and it can be, and it can grow with the organization.
I guess it's a follow-up question for, because a lot of organizations don't have the luxury of having professionals like you folks. For a small organization, would you say then, Angela, that that's the place to start? Classification, just so you can find it.
I would say that right at a foundational level is make sure it's organized and managed, and everybody understands what that means. Because as long as you have that, then it doesn't matter. Yeah.
And what would be next? Would it be privacy?
Yeah, privacy, security, access. Depending on what kind of industry you're in, it might be better to move to more of a security and security classifications. Depending on it depends on your industry, but look at the access and who needs to access and what the connection points between departments need to be. How are you going to push information out? Then you're getting more into the management and management of the information outside of the classification and capturing all of the life cycle of it.
Mm-hmm. And retention, where do you see retention fitting in?
Starts right at the start.
Right at the start.
Yes, and that's why I love
fruit.
That's one of the reasons why I love that comment from Wayne is typically a lot of people will classify it when they're done with it, and it should be classified at the point of creation, and the retention can be attached to the classification. All right. Why wouldn't you do it from the start?
Yeah, because you're overwhelmed. It's like, where do I start? I don't even know.
Yeah.
Oh, this is so great. Is there any other comments, Mohammed, Alan, or Angela, that you wanted to add before I see we got 2 minutes left here.
It's a pretty big topic, actually. We can talk hours and hours here, even on a single topic within this data governance.
Yeah, it is. It's overwhelming, actually. I find it overwhelming.
That's why it's good to focus on like just one thing. You don't need to do all of the things. You just need to do one.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what I'd say too, is just like information management, data strategy and data governance, it's a journey, not an assignment. Like, it's iterative. There's different steps, different levels. That's why we have governance models and maturity models, is we understand, and this is a big thing about winning people over, is explaining that it's not a server. We're not adding capacity overnight. We're building.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You can't do it overnight. And one thing you need when you're working on that data governance, you need a patience. That's very important to have, because it's going to take time and you have to face lots of criticism and all those things. And where I started this one first, when I developed the scope, then I did maybe one that might be helpful for other organization as well, do the data literacy survey. We conducted the data literacy survey. So we captured the need of the people who wanted to know in the organization because why we did the data literacy, of course, the governance, and the main purpose is we are moving towards implementing or having a data-driven culture in the organization. It's also very important, so we can see the percentage of the people to know about the data set, what they think about the data set. Are they making the decision? It doesn't mean that we are not making decision on the basis of data set, but how many people are doing it? How many people, when they need to make a decision on the road, are in the field? How are they considering the background information? Are they just making the decision with their gut feel, or whatever is available? Are they consult with the data set? So data literacy survey is important.
Oh, and I see Ken
Thanks,
threw a link
Ken.
there. Yeah, that's awesome.
Ken rocks.
Yeah, Ken makes a good comment about definitions of data too. And we had a bit of a joke when we were practicing this session, is data information or is information data? And I mean, we can argue about it for fun, but I would be the one to argue that data has different types. And yeah, there's raw data, there's structured data, there's dark data, there's garbage data too.
Well, thank you all so much, Alan, Mohammed, and Angela. Thank you so very much for doing this panel today, and for everyone who's here and all the great comments in the chat. This was a really, really great session, very informative. Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives. Rick, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
I just wanted to thank the Western Canadian ARMA chapters for the RIM month sessions that we're doing now. I thoroughly enjoyed this session. Thanks all of you for doing such a great job at talking about this topic. It's an ongoing discussion for sure. Almost everywhere I go and everybody I talk to. So wonderful thing. If you're not an ARMA member now, please make that a priority on your list to become an ARMA member and stay with us on our sessions as we go forward. Thanks everybody for joining us today. It's one of the larger numbers of participants we've had, and next week's is up there as well. So I'm looking forward to next week's presentation as well. Everybody have a great rest of your week, and we'll look forward to seeing you all sometime soon in person, I hope.
Thanks again, everyone.
Good. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.